So good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute, just a few more people joining us.
Morning, folks. You're very welcome.
Right, I think we have the majority of people in now, so we might kick off. So welcome everyone to LIA's written exam study tips. We're delighted to have so many of you joining us here today. Hopefully, you'll find this useful in your preparation for your upcoming exams. My name is Eva Lavin. I'm the Education Manager in LIA, and I'm joined here today by our subject matter expert, Bryan Johnston.
Morning, Eva. Good morning, everybody. Very welcome.
So really, this session is really relevant to people who are sitting the QFA Financial Advice exam and the Retirement Planning Advice 1 and Retirement Planning Advice 2 exam. This session will be about 15 to 20 minutes, and what we'll cover during that time is study resources that are available to you, the study techniques, exam overview and technique, exam terminology, and then we'll have a short Q&A at the end. So you should see at the bottom of your screens there's a Q&A box. So if you have any questions in relation to study or anything that we cover today, please just pop your question in and we'll answer that at the end. So we're going to kick off with the study resources. So I'm not sure if people have logged into their LIA, have accessed their study resources, but one of the things we always say to students is really, really important to access the study resources that are available to you by logging into your LIA. There's a suite of resources that are available and they're really beneficial to help you prepare for your exam. The resources are available 24/7. So you can also view them if you're on the go. So they're really, really useful in terms of your preparation, and we'll go through each of those resources briefly as well. I suppose, Bryan, in terms of the textbook, would you agree that this is really the most important element or part of the study resource suite?
Yeah, Eva, and good morning, everybody. Absolutely. So your textbook, your financial planning, your financial advice textbook, your RPA textbooks, this is where the exam comes from. Everything else is really to support that. So it is really, really so important that you get to know your book, that you go through your book. And this is where the exam will be taken from. Everything else is to support that. Like the lectures on demand, myself and the other lecturers, what we try to do with the lectures on demand is, I suppose in a way, is to translate the book for you, to help your understanding of the book and so forth. It's, we'd see it as a skeleton, as an outline sometimes, but the devil is in the details sometimes. So it really, really is so important to use your.
Oh, sorry, Bryan, I was going to say, and you're like, I suppose from lecturing as well, you'd be really used to the study resources and the benefits of those resources that are like available for students.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as I say, the revision lectures. So there's a revision lectures held 2 or 3, 4 weeks before the exam. It's a great time for people at the moment to log in anyway, to see other students there, but also, to go through some of the main parts of the manual, but also very much with an exam focus. So that's really what we try to do with the revision lectures. It's very much, it's using the material, but with an exam focus. Your study buddy then again will give you some very practical tips, about how to approach the exam and so forth, in terms of, making notes and what to do. The exam buddy then gives you a couple of past papers then as well, with solutions and so forth, so you can have a look at the past papers and, and some sample papers then as well. And that's really, really important. So, I suppose the one thing is so important, and we'll be mentioning this again later on, is to practice these. For some people, it could be quite a while since they've done a written exam. So it is so important that you practice the past papers. So when you go in to do that exam on whatever, the Saturday or the Sunday, it's not the first time you've attempted that. So we'll come back to that a little bit later on anyway. And as I mentioned then as well, if we have these lectures on demand, in probably in a bit more detail then as well, going through the various chapters in the various manuals, giving the overview and the big picture then as well. So people use that maybe to go through the material first of all to get an understanding of it, and other people then might use it as well for revision.
Great, thanks, Brian. And I suppose with the first exams now taking place coming up really shortly in the next few weeks, what should students really be thinking of in terms of their study?
Okay, well, if they haven't started to study already, there's no, as somebody once said, there's no time like the future. But obviously, there's no time like the present. You get yourself organised. Ultimately, at some stage, you have to study this. So I'd say start and get a plan. Give yourself a plan. It gives you a much better chance then of sticking to it as well. Okay, maybe work out, from when it happens. Obviously, we're so many weeks away from the exam now. If you haven't started, but if you have, you have more time. Work out how many weeks you have to the exam and what days and hours you're going to study. You have a much better chance of achieving that then as well. If you know psychologically you've set in your mind that you're studying every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday or whatever like that at certain times. So block off that time. Obviously, you can, try and get a nice quiet space with no, with nothing to take you away from your concentration. Maybe ask members of the family if they could keep it down for that while. And I'm a great believer as well as, don't have big blocks of time, like, I'll study all day Saturday or all day Sunday. We tend to remember better in sort of short bursts, 40 to 60 minutes. Now, certainly tag a few of those along, but do break them up as well. Your concentration will only last for so long. Personally, it works better for me. I think I prefer to do it in the morning because, after a day's work, I'm sure many of you are quite tired as well, and it can be quite hard to do it. And don't forget as well, take your exercise and look after yourself. That's really important as well. But also maybe give yourself a reward. So when you've done so much study, you're entitled to a cup of tea or a bun or whatever like that, a walk. So you have that to look forward to. I'm not sure how many people this would be possible for, Aoife, but maybe you're lucky enough to be working with somebody or know somebody else doing one of the exams. It's great to form a study group. So that gives you so many advantages. First of all, you might say, okay, well, we'll meet or probably meet online these days, for an hour or so. We'll ask each other questions, we'll quiz each other or go through some of the more difficult areas. It's motivation for you then. So the chances are you'll turn up. And it's also a great, chance, especially with this, because with these exams, you're thinking a bit more. You're not just answering questions like in the multiple choice. You have to reason out some answers and so forth. So it's a great way to bounce ideas off other people then as well. And of course, the other resource you have is all the people in the LIA and the wonderful support that they give as well. So I'll hand you back to Aoife then on that one.
Yeah, I suppose, Brian, like it's really important, and I hope the students do realize that LIA are here to support you, on your study journey, to help you prepare for your exam. So we're always available, and by email, phone, and live chat on the website if you've ever any questions in relation to your preparation or anything that you're unsure of. We're always more than happy to help you with your preparation.
And in fact, Aoife, I know you've often passed some stuff on to me then as well. If there's ever a technical thing or you're not sure about this answer or that answer, and maybe you want a reason sometimes for some things, I know that you'll also send that on. So, if you have any technical queries as well, we're always delighted to help.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I suppose in terms of, like, I know when I started studying, Brian, like I would have found it really useful to make my own notes when I was studying. Do you have any tips for students on how they should approach their study?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, and don't forget this is a written exam as well. So people are going to have to write things, whatever like that. So it's a good time now. Okay, I know at the moment we're not writing or whatever like that, but even to type notes then as well, sort of to help you with that. But when you are studying, once you start to write stuff down, you tend to remember it better then as well. So that's really, really important, is to take notes, maybe put it in your own words, can be really, really important. Okay. Another thing that works very well, particularly for this technical sort of stuff, pensions and life and financial advice and so forth, is mind mapping. So any of you have ever come across mind mapping before can be a really useful way to take notes and a great way to remember things. Because don't forget in the examinations, they're looking for a number of points about things. And as you can see there with our friend Homer Simpson there and Mifflin, then, you know, if you can picture things like that, okay, it tends to be easier to remember them sometimes. You have your little arrows going off and so forth. And I'm sure some of you use mind mapping. It's very easy to get started on, and it's a really wonderful, wonderful way. And you can be very creative as well on that. So it's a great way to do it. So obviously take notes whatever way you do it. As I mentioned then as well, we tend to learn better in short bursts. We tend to remember things at the start of the lesson and at the end of the lesson. So if you can keep those short, we'll remember them better. Also, in terms of revision, it's really important. So, you know, so they say learning is all about repetition and checking yourself. So read the stuff, okay, and go back over and review it, move on to something else, go back over and review it and so forth, and then it will stick. But also test yourself. And again, in your manuals, you'll find end of chapter questions as well. So that's a great way to test yourself as well. So it's so important to really to test yourself.
So Brian, this is was the first one now is QFA financial advice. Do you want to maybe just talk us through the QFA
Yeah, I
financial
suppose
advice
maybe the
exam?
first thing to mention, Eva, is the exam is now 2.5 hours long.
Mhm.
So it was always 2 hours, but because it's all been done online now, so it's giving that extra half an hour to people as well, because it's actually being done online. So it's a written exam. So normally at this stage, I'd be looking around for fellas like myself who are all the bad writers and give them lots of advice about writing tips and using blue pens and all that. So the good news now is, and I think this was a huge thing for rectors as well, was reading a person's writing. So the good news is this is all typed and you're given that extra half an hour for that. So that's important. You have 3 questions for in 2.5 into which is 150 minutes. So you have roughly 50 minutes per question. So again, with the written exams, they do take more time. You're probably used to, you know, having a reasonable amount of time for the MCQs. But with the written exams, you do have to think and you have to lay out and so forth. So you do need to watch your clock. I think that's very important. Once again, the pass mark is 40%. Question 1, which is a case study type, is for 20 marks. Question 2 and question 3 then, which again, you get a further case study and maybe some calculations, and it'll be testing your knowledge then as well for 40 marks. And in fairness, with all these exams, you always get a broad range of questions. Okay. Now, obviously, they're your questions for that particular exam, but you know, there's never a concentration on, oh well, it's only going to be you know, everything will be on pensions this one, or everything will be on life. So you'll always get a broad range. And again, don't take my word for this. Go back over the past papers as well. I think that's important. So 40%, and there's no choice in them whatsoever. So once again, at the workshops, we go into this in a lot more detail as well, the type of questions and so forth. But just be very aware, you know, you have 3 questions and you have 2.5 hours to do it.
Great, thanks, Brian. And then next up, then we have retirement planning advice 1 and 2. So if we could just go through those
So,
exams as
so,
well.
so once again, there's a lot of crossover here again,
Mhm.
40% pass mark. Once again, 2.5 hours to do it. Okay, slight change on the marks then for this one, for retirement planning 1 and 2. So question 1 is for 40 marks, and question 2 and 3 is 30 marks each then again. And again, like financial advice, go into a lot more advice that on the actual days itself.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brian. And I suppose really it can be daunting as well for students if they haven't, sat a written exam in a while, or for students who are sitting QFA financial advice exam, they might be used to completing, the MCQ exam. Um, so I suppose in terms of that, exam technique is really important.
Absolutely, Eva. And look, I suppose the first thing I'd say to everybody is, right, you need to have done this exam at least 2 or 3 times before you do it, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So you need to sit down and attempt a past paper, okay? Now, there's plenty of past papers available online. So these are actual past papers that are available online. What you need to do is sit down and test yourself. See what it feels like. Because it's all grand when you hear this in the lecture or you're reading the stuff. Yeah, I would have said that anyway. When you're facing a blank sheet of paper, it's a different story altogether. And the more you practice these, the better you get. So I would say practice, practice, practice. With the exam papers, you'll also get the answers. And what I'd say to you with those is don't go near them until you've really, really tried. So that's the important, because obviously on the day, you'll have a blank sheet of paper in front of you. So torture yourself. And it's amazing. Once you start to practice these papers, you get much better at it. So it's not the first time you have written out maybe an income tax question, or something like that, or attempted a case study. So you've done this before. Now your questions may well be different, but you've done it before, so you're used to the style of doing it and so forth. Your mind and your body are used to answering these questions. So really, really important. Allow a time for, as I said, you have 2.5 hours, which roughly, it's about 50 minutes per question. Obviously, be cognizant. Some questions carry more marks than others. So, you might have to adjust that a little bit. And also you need some time at the beginning and some time at the end to read over the paper and to review it then at the end as well. So that's really, really important as well. But don't be running out of time, like, 2 hours, 15 minutes, and you haven't even attempted question 3. So that's where you do need to manage your clock. And I think it's fair to say that usually you get most of your marks in the first few lines anyway, so rather than just keep on writing. Another point is obviously read the question carefully. Make sure you answer what you're being asked. Okay, that's important. If you see a question about, let's say, a PRSA, it might be a very specific question. It's not for you to all of a sudden just dump everything you know on the paper about PRSAs. So watch what you're being asked to do. Okay, outline in your mind at least, or maybe even jot it down. Okay, your answer before writing. And Eva, just let me go back to, maybe you can confirm this for me. People can have a blank sheet of paper in front of them for rough work as well, can't they? Just
they can. So you can
to jot down their thoughts.
Exactly. So if for workings out, or to jot down your thoughts, you said people can have a blank piece of paper. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that particularly so, especially for maybe a calculation type one, that you sort of do it out, because we generally, oh God, I forgot to do that, I forgot to do that, So I think that's really worthwhile, whatever like that. Sort of take time, watch the mark. So so sometimes, and we'll go through some examples of questions. Sometimes you don't need very much at all. And bullet points often work. So, just think about what you've been asked to. If it's a longer question, maybe you need to write a little introduction and maybe a summary at the end. And what you don't need to do is, and I see people doing this sometimes, you don't need to write out the question again. And sometimes people do that. You don't need to do that, and you're wasting your time. Whatever. Go back over your answers again. That's important. We spoke about this when we were putting this together, is the importance of bullet points. Again, if you look over past exam and the solutions, okay, they tend to come in sort of bullet point, and a bullet point, not just being tax maybe, but being a sentence or two about tax. So typically a bullet point is just 1 or 2 sentences or whatever like that. And that helps you to keep your thoughts organized as well. So you'll see the number of marks per question, so if you're asked, give 3 points about XYZ for 6 marks, okay, you have to give 3 things, and it's generally speaking like that, it'll be 2 marks per point or whatever like that. So be very, very, very aware of that. I think we have a few more just to remind me on the next one. Yeah. Oh yeah, always read the examples in the textbook. Very often a question is taken exactly from the example in your textbook, and it'll be like that. So make sure you go through the examples in your textbook. Very, very important. If you have a calculation to do as well, explain the figures. So, if you're doing, say, an income tax question or something like that, writing the figures down, supposing you make a mistake, okay, now the examiner doesn't know what you're doing. But you might make a mistake but be doing the right thing, for argument's sake. So you just put the wrong figure in. So you're actually doing it the right way, So now if the examiner knows that, well, he actually did it right, he just, for whatever reason, he got the, the tax credit or whatever mixed up. So I think it's always a good idea to explain the figures as you go through it. Another thing then is, number your questions, particularly if you answer them out of sequence. It's really, really important. So very often, you'll have question 2B, 1-3, 1C, and so forth. So they'll be numbered like that. Make sure, don't make it hard for the examiner. Make sure that you number your questions. And as I mentioned before, there's no need to rewrite the questions. And crucially, watch the marks. That is so important. And in fairness to the exams, they're really great now. They'll nearly always ask you, give us 3 points, give us 4 points, give us 5 points in relation to this. So it makes it really, really good. So what you're being asked. You'll also get the tables you need in the exams. So if it's a tax question, they'll give you the tax credits and so forth. Okay, so they'll give you the tables. Make sure you know how to use those as well.
Exactly. And I think, Brian, just your point as well on the past papers, like students tend to, dive into the past paper and the solutions. But remember that the corrector's feedback from the previous exams are also available. So you can see, feedback from the correctors, where do students fall down, where do they gain marks? And that can be really useful to help you prepare for your exam, because you can see exactly where students gained marks for questions or where they lost marks for certain questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I suppose I can't emphasize enough the importance of practicing as well. And as you say, but being aware of where people went wrong in the past, but not looking at the answers until you really give it a go. And then it's a bit like sport. It's like muscle memory. The body remembers what's to do and whatever like that. We often see that there, once people practice one or two things, like, you might be listening to me or James or somebody else in one of the lectures or whatever like that, doing the stuff, say, oh yeah, that's easy. But it's not until you actually go and take out the calculator or do it that you really find what it's like to do it. So it's so important to practice.
Exactly. And all those documents, your sample, your past papers, your solutions, and the corrector's feedback are all within the document called Exam Buddy in your study resources.
Great.
So I think, Brian, I might hand this over to you to go through like the terminology then that's used in the exams.
Yeah, so just a couple of points here that sort of, and again, I think the examiners have said this as well, and sometimes people are surprised about this, but if you see the word list, it's just literally a list. Okay, so there's the example. Teresa has a car finance deal under PCP agreement. List the 3 options available to her. So if it's a list, it's very short. So she can pay the final payment, okay, and keep the car. She can hand the car back, or she can put the car down as a deposit for another car. Literally, what are you talking about here? 10 words. So it's very, very short. If you have a black belt in PCP agreements, if you're the expert in PCP agreements, there's no point in writing a 10-page document, and PCPs were invented in the Roman times and they developed in Middle Ages. You know what I mean? Like, that's all they want is a little list. And sometimes with the list, it's just simply words. Okay. So it can be, and again, using past papers, again, you can see that as well. So you're familiar with that as well. Now, if you get a word like explain, you're obviously into more stuff. Okay. So explain why you as a financial advisor need to complete a full fact find. So this, this isn't, just a 1 or 2 words. So why do we need to do a fact find? Without that information, the financial advisor isn't in a position to accurately identify, quantify fully a customer's financial needs, or indeed to make appropriate recommendations suitable to the customer's needs. And I obviously beware of the number of points in that, So if there's 4 marks for this, they're probably looking for 2 points. There's 6, they're probably looking for 3. So always, make it point by point as well. And secondly, the advisor, sorry, anyway, it went on there, but it's the same idea. So the advisors, so again, secondly, it's the law, basically. You have to do it under the CPC or MiFID regulations as well. Yeah, absolutely. Watch the number of marks. Oh yeah, here's one that I found that a lot of people went wrong when it happened. In January, Joe received a gift of 50,000 from his auntie to help with the purchase of his house. His mum died in September 18, and Joe was the sole beneficiary of her estate. The estate is valued at $1 million, which is made up of his mum's home and cash deposits. Calculate the capital acquisitions tax liability for Joe arising from each of these benefits. So effectively, we were looking here for a calculation from the auntie and from Joe's mum. So there was 10 marks, so you had 5 marks each. The other thing that you might see on a lot of these exam questions is state any assumptions you're making. So really what they're saying in that one is, you can assume, okay, so you might want to assume that Joe never received any gifts or inheritances, from any of this. The second category is the aunts and the uncles at all, and he never received any gifts or inheritance from his mum before. So that allows you to, to bring everything, and if you're doing an assumption, I'd always, always state the most simple one that works in your favor. Don't make it complicated. Actually make it simple. And again, explain why Joe's mum had previously been advised to take out a Section 72 policy for 4 marks then as well. So that was just the second part of that question. But watch the first one, there was 2 questions. Another one then from the retirement planning, okay? So again, key here is the marks. List 7 items of information. You would need to calculate the revenue allowed maximum ordinary annual contributions to an executive pension plan for the current year after payment of the special contributions. So once again, that's a list. However, the second part of the question was, in the case of each item of information you mentioned, indicate why you would need that item of information to work out the maximum ordinary annual contribution to the EPP for the current year. So you have 14 marks, and look, essentially you get 1 mark, okay, for the list, and a second mark for the reason why. So 7 of those. So it's a list and a reason, a list and a reason, a list and a reason, a list and a reason. And if they're looking for 7, obviously if you only give them 3, you're only going to be marked out at 3 and so forth. So again, I think we've just developed that a little bit more where you can see it there, just to give you 1 or 2 examples. So number 1, you need to know the date of birth, the person's age. So there's a mark for that. But you get your second mark then for why. And it's even a good idea, maybe, I think, to put the why there. You know, it just makes you think about that. Why? Because it impacts on the remaining number of ordinary annual contributions can be made now between a normal retirement age. 2 nice marks there. That's all you need. Why? Number 2, the normal retirement age of the scheme. Why is that 1 mark? Why? It impacts on the revenue capitalization factor to be used, the remaining number of ordinary annual contributions which can be made between now and normal retirement age. So once again, you see it, the whole idea, it's a list and the why. Current revenue best practice allows calculations of final remuneration. Why? It's needed to work at the maximum provable pension and so forth. So 7 of those, list and why, list and why. Okay, so always read the question. It's so important.
Yeah, and I think actually that's a really good approach as well, Brian, because we said, like, often in the exams, it's a high stress environment for students, and it really does make you kind of gather your thoughts and kind of put your thoughts in an order. It's really good. I think that's really useful for students.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And again, it's all about practice, isn't it? Like, so
Yeah.
you've seen these type of questions before. It's not the first time that you've seen them, which is so important. Yeah, very true indeed.
So that actually brings us to the end of our written exam study tips. And thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. We hope you found that useful and it helped you in the preparation for your study. Thank you so much to Brian as well for joining me. And I suppose just to reiterate the fact that if you have any questions at all in relation to your study or your exam, please contact LIA, and you can contact us by email, phone, or live chat on our website. And I've just left the contact details up on screen there as well. I'm just going to, oh, sorry, Brian.
I was just going to say there's a couple of questions there, Eva, then as
Yeah.
well. So I just see one that maybe that I could answer while you're having a look at them.
Yeah.
So for financial advice, in the case study, if they ask for 4 mistakes and you answer 6 mistakes, but 2 were incorrect, would you still get full marks? Absolutely. So typically in financial advice, your first one, they're looking for 4 errors and inconsistencies. They typically give you 5 or 6. They'll mark you on the best of there for those. Okay. So
Great.
it's still, and the great news about all of this is, guys, we were talking to people there about MCQs a few minutes ago. There isn't any negative marking on this.
Exactly. Yeah. Another question in there is just, can you let me know if a dictionary is allowed, and will the exam, I suppose for the written exam, will there be an autocorrect? So there isn't an autocorrect, but students are not penalized for grammar or spelling mistakes in the online exam. If you need a dictionary, just please contact LIA beforehand just to let us know that you require a dictionary for your exam, just so we can approve it for your online exam. Another question is, do you just write your answers in Word or Excel, or are you given a template? So under each of the questions, you will have like a blank space to answer your question. It'll be similar to almost like a notepad where you just type your answer in under each of the questions.
There's another one there. If you're asked for 3 points, is there any advantage or indeed disadvantage of giving more? No, absolutely not. So sometimes if you gave them 4 points, maybe the first one you gave was wrong. So once again, they'll mark you out of the best. They'll mark you out of the best there as well on that.
Yeah. Another question, how much of the 2.5 hours is taken up with setting up, checking your ID for the online exam? So the 2.5 hours is dedicated to your actual exam. It does not include the time you are taking to set up or showing your ID or any of that side. So as soon as you enter into the exam and you start your exam, the 2.5 hours starts from then. Another question, are you allowed to print the exam tables instead of having them open in Word format? So for the written exams and for actually all our exams, the exam tables will be available in Word format or PDF. So you can have them open on your screen. They're not available to print for the exam. Let me see. When is the lecture for financial advice? Well, Bryan, that's you tomorrow. Am I
Tomorrow.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if anyone doesn't know or hasn't got a link yet to the financial advice lecture tomorrow, just please contact LIA and we will send that on to you. Where do you find past papers? Past papers are in the exam buddy document, which is available in your study resources.
Is it okay to use abbreviations in the exam like NRA and OAC? I wouldn't see a problem with that, if it's fairly well known. Eva, would you?
Yeah, that should be fine. Really, like abbreviations are generally fine to use, and abbreviations will be used in the textbook as well. So that's all fine.
I suppose just to make sure that you're using the right ones, so if you made a wrong one, then so whereas if you had it written out fully, maybe the examiner would understand. But if you put a totally wrong one, and then what's he or she on about?
Exactly, yeah.
Can you do rough work on the paper to demonstrate your knowledge? So I think, as we said before, you can do rough work on the paper, but I suppose it doesn't demonstrate your knowledge in so much that it doesn't go into the examiner then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's important that you do record, your answers on the actual online exam platform, and whether that's the case that you want to add in a few extra notes, type in a few extra comments, that's fine. But any rough work that you write on, won't be included as part of the correction of the exam. Is there an RPA 1 lecture? Yes, there is. And if you contact us, we'll be able to advise you about that. The lecture tomorrow for QFA Financial Advice is running from 10 until around 3 o'clock, Bryan, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Unless I go out tonight. I hear the restaurants are opening again, are they tonight?
Yeah.
No, tomorrow, 10 o'clock, guys.
And then the other question is in relation to, is the exam time and date that you were advised in an email, is that the exam start time? And yes, so you should go by, everyone at this stage now should have received an email from LIA with their exam date and time, and that is the time that they need to start their exam at. I think that's all the questions.
And tomorrow's been recorded. See, somebody will it be available. Somebody can't attend tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that has been recorded as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's really kind of the majority of questions. If I'm just conscious of time, if we didn't get to anyone, we will reply to separately if we didn't get to any of the questions. Likewise, if you have any additional questions to ask us, please contact us and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. But thanks again for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And listen, best of luck in the exams. Okay.